Hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how Strat ERP contracts with its contract service providers. So let's get started. Okay, so here's an overview of the 5 slides we're going to use. We'll talk about global contracts, contract types. We'll talk about MSCs, or what we call master service contracts, SOWs, or what we call statements of work, why you would use each. And then we'll talk a little bit about how contracts really govern everything. So with that, let's jump in. This should be fairly short. So slide 1, why does Strat ERP have contractual relationships in multiple legal jurisdictions? Really, the idea here is that contracts, if you're in the same legal jurisdiction, they really have teeth. But if you're crossing legal jurisdictions, quite frankly, they don't. But what they do is they set in writing the expectation of all the parties. And most of these contracts, like if things go south, they go south. What you really want to do with the contract is clearly articulate everybody's roles and remuneration, their responsibilities, right? And so that's really, we use contracts even though we're crossing legal jurisdictions. So you could argue there's not a lot of teeth in them. But we try to work on a really positive relationship. We try to work where it's a good place for everybody to be, financially, mentally, to be happy. And so contracts allow us to spell out what everybody's supposed to be doing, what their roles are, and their remuneration. So slide 2, how does Strat ERP contract with its service providers? So let's talk a little bit of hierarchy. The first thing is we have a pre-project master service contract. This is, in procurement parlance, this is a buyer-supplier agreement, and it is largely perpetual. Sometimes they'll redo them, but the important thing to note is it's not per purchase. Then we have SOWs, and so the SOWs are linked, or they roll into a master service contract. The SOWs would largely inherit the terms and conditions from the master service contract. They may add more. We know that they add certain clarity on things like your role, or your role type, or service line, etc. So slide 3, master service contract. What's the purpose of the master service contract? By the way, you may also hear these called MSA, or master service agreement. We don't use that because it means something different inside of cloud. So this is, as I said earlier, a perpetual agreement. Defines the parties, so who's the buyer, who's supplying the labor, defines the conditions, and then it defines the terms. So these terms are used everywhere in the firm. So we'll define, for example, we talked role types or levels. So it defines all of these different terms that we use to group and report and structure our contracting labor force. And then it provides, or defines rather, the roles for each of those providers or contract service providers. Next up, the statement of work. So we talked about the master, and now we're talking about the inheritance, or the document that is specific to each instance of a purchase. So what's the purpose? Well, it's a limited term agreement, defines the period of performance for that purchase, specifies exactly what the contract service provider is going to do, what the rate is they're going to get paid, what the provider's role that's above them overseeing them, and then it specifies a provider, the managing provider or the directing provider as well. Okay, and so the last slide here, and this is kind of an obvious question, but what's the connective tissue, or the glue that's linking the invoicing, the provider engagement, even the folder structures inside of Strat ERP? What links all of this together? Well, it's the master service, or all of our contracts. They really govern, right? They define all the things that we're talking about for structuring, for managing contract service providers. These are all legal terms. And so they reflect the contracts, they reflect the directories, they reflect compensation. They're really the core, if you will, of how we operate as a firm. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully this was useful, and you learned something about contracts. Thanks for watching.